Father, I thank you right now for this time. Lord, I thank you for the many families that will be represented here. Father, I thank you for the thousands of families that will be changed by viewing what it is that we are doing. Bless it. Let your will be done. Let it be done, God. God, break generational curses that are in our own personal lives as parents, and help us to raise these children in one of the most volatile times ever for family. Father, I thank you in advance for each one of the panelists here and the parents who are sitting in the audience and those who are attending. Father, let them know they get a little extra grace for just showing up, for taking care of their family and investing. Father, help them not to be offended by the truth, because it will come forth, but let them walk out of here changed. Father, I'm asking that the anointing that you placed on my life and my wife's life and then the rest of these parents, that we can transfer it. Bless it. Bless it. Family matters, because family matters to God. Everybody says parents are people too. Amen. And I just want to give you a quick intro for each one so that you know what we're dealing with. And I'm not going to say a lot about each, but I want you to understand these are people who walked into these conferences just like you 10, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, and they received the fruit from it. So let's go ahead and play the first one, and then we'll pause it on each couple. That's Ed and Taya Gregory. That's them today. He makes me laugh. They raised a beautiful family. That's Renee and Rivian Johnson. Pause. They don't have, I want y'all to get that daggone cowboy picture y'all sent me, and we'll just play it tomorrow, because this is a fun-loving couple. Well, they have a beautiful family. They started off with their children. They didn't even have children when we met them. And their children were raised into this church, and they became respectable, fine gentlemen. The next person, please. Felicia Johnson. Now, pause. I just told her this morning, I had no idea while I was doing a boyfriend-girlfriend thing 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, that she would be sitting in the audience, and that she would end up being a person that would come and become a great mother, a great parent, a great wife, and make it through a lot of trials. Next one, please. Beautiful family. Greg and Sahira Long. Now, they chose a different route. Pause. They homeschooled their children. They saw us, well, I'm going to say we did family stuff, and then they came together and they got into a discussion, and they decided they were going to homeschool. And they've done an excellent job in homeschool. Greg stayed home full time to homeschool his kids, which led to other people in the church doing the same thing. Ed and Taya. At one point, Ed's son, that big dude that you saw sitting there, he was getting bullied in class. And Ed came to our house, and Joe and I, we spoke with him and said, hey, listen, we said, you're going to have to homeschool him, man. And he made that decision. And him making that one decision, his child is one of the number one recruits at the University of Maryland football team. He's still in high school. And he got full scholarships and everything. His daughter, full scholarships to, I don't know how she ended up in Wyoming or Washington State or something. Iowa, that's even worse. And I'm not saying Iowa is worse, but this little black girl in Iowa. Well, she done started her own Bible study ministry. She done started ministering to people on campus. It's a whole lot. Little Ryan, he's in art school. He's finally, not art, but he's in college pursuing his career. Let's get to the next. What's the next person? I just want you to know who's presenting next. Ashley Montgomery. This is a man of power. This family raised him up to be a man. He came in a man, so he thought. But them little girls and little boys gave him and Sabrina a run for their money. But say they hung in there. And say they got love now. Say it was tight as you can believe. But they pulled it together and they pulled it out. Next one, please. Daryl and Lisa. I paused that. I just stopped because I had never seen Lisa. Hey, put that back on there again and pause on her. Look at Lisa's face. That's Val, and that's Lisa's face. And look at little Daryl. Look at that little young face. Unbelievable. Well, they had triplets. She was in bed rest for how many months? 5 months. So Jill sat with her for 5 months while she was on bed rest. A couple other people came through with her, and they raised these triplets. Now, all 3 of them are in college. They ain't got no money. This is faith. Are y'all listening to me? By faith, she moved from one neighborhood to another neighborhood because she had to get her kids out of the school and was gone for 4 years. By what? Faith. Now, these are respectable young ladies. They're beautiful, but they ain't throwing no sexy. Well, we'll get to that because she got advice from Jill, advice from us to say, hey, listen, raise these kids properly.
They're my goddaughters.
Okay, there you go. Next one, please. And I'm going to move this faster. Janice Sexton and where's her husband? Sheldon. They're families in Atlanta, and they're raising beautiful daughters. Next, let's keep going. Cabby McCoy, the first member of the church that I realized was crazy. We had to loan her our cars because it was getting repossessed. She was married to a beautiful man now, but at that point, they were our first counseling couples. Reminded me that in the basement. And I said, God, if this is what this job is going to be about, I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle it. Well, she's a single mother. She got divorced. She went through all kinds of stuff, was homeless and everything. But she raised 2 beautiful sons, respectable, who are now taking the lead for me because they have the character. Keep playing, please. Joe and Asia, we call them the party people. I think that was taken at a club, period. If you want to get the party started, call these 2 people. They're crazy as all get out, but they're a good crazy. And they're crazy in the Lord, and God has blessed them. And they went to our family conference, and we're going to show later on. Y'all look at Joe. Don't you believe that freaking smile? He was by far, he was in a tie with Ed when it came to anger. Both he and Tyre and Asia, they were pleading, please help us, because these men have lost it. Now, I'm believing that Ed is going to tell one of his most embarrassing moments, going to that thing with your son and that lady that was in the car, and you had a very colorful conversation with her, and she ended up in the same building with you. Come on now. Come on now. Don't act like you don't remember. And Tyre, you just remind him, okay? 2 more, please. That's their family now. Look at little Rob and Tony West. Well, Rob and Tony West, hey, pause it. Don't people get beautiful when they get older? I looked at all y'all look much better, man. Well, not that you look bad then, but you look much better now. Well, that's their family. And they've raised beautiful kids. Let's keep going, please. I think that's it. That's it. Let's give our presenters a hand. I would now like to turn it over to Atlanta.
How y'all doing? My name's Rivion Johnson, and this is my wife, Renee. And as Deron mentioned earlier, we've been here, it'll be 23 years since we met Deron and Jill. And actually, if it's 23 years, that means I was 23 when I came, and I've been here 23 years, so 46 now. And one of the things that I like to talk about, I have 2 boys. One's 20, he'll be 21 this year. The other one, Ryan, Rivion Jr. is 20, he'll be 21 this year. Ryan, he'll be 19 this year. And they were asking me to speak about vision. what was our vision? What was our mission for our family? Well, first you have to understand part of my background, and my background was this. I grew up with my grandparents. My mom was on crack. If any of you all came through that time of the 80s, but my mom was on crack. She got caught up in that whole crack thing. My father wasn't there. I became a product, so to speak, of my environment, where, ironically, I have a mom on crack, but then I chose to deal drugs and that sort of thing. But that wasn't what I wanted for my life. Part of that came from being angry, being lost, not having the male guidance. The one male person that I did have in my life who was consistent was my grandfather, which he passed away when I was 15 years old. Actually, the very next day, my birthday was February 3rd. I turned 15, and he died on the 4th. So in him, in that happening, there was a lot that was lost. And as I got older, I realized that a lot of my anger and a lot of my bitterness and a lot of those things stem from the fact that there were situations in my life that I was going through that I would have really rather had someone and had a level of guidance. So how does that fast forward to me raising my two boys and my wife and I coming together? Well, one of my favorite scriptures, and I'll read it to you, and that is, it says, where there is no vision, my people perish, or my people cast off restraint. And so one of the things that I live by is that I had to have a vision. And what was that vision for me? I didn't want what I went through. I didn't want my kids' experience to be what mine was. And so that was the driving force in a lot of ways for me in terms of how I was going to raise these two boys. And so where some people took their hurt and the things that they did not have coming up, and it was allowed to be perverted through anger, I chose to say, no, I want to go in a different direction. I want to do something different with these boys. I want to be there. But one, I want to be there, in Christ. I wanted God. We had to have a God-centered, relationship with our kids. It had to be God-focused first. Because when I was coming up, mine was anger-focused. So my guidance and the way that I was dealing with my life responses was through anger and through the world's view, and it just wasn't working. And so I had to take a different route, a different approach with them, and it had to be first God-centered. And those values had to, one, line up with who God is and who God was in my life. Well, then that caused me to have to change. That caused my wife, and I'll give her an opportunity to speak. But that caused us to first have to work on us. And so as parents, we had to first begin to deal with our own issues, our own insecurities. I had to deal with those things first, because in order to be intentional in terms of raising them, I had to first be intentional on getting the things that I lacked and that I wasn't equipped with. And so I commend you all for even taking the day out of your Saturday, because most people wouldn't do what you're doing. So you're already ahead of the curve. You're already ahead of the game, because you chose to take time out for your family. And for that, you need to be commended, because most people won't do that. Because that's the beginning stage, or the beginning start of recognizing, one, that you need to get something for yourself in order to now pour back into, because I couldn't give them what I didn't have. So that meant I had to read. If you look at my bookshelf, I have tons and tons of books, and I'm pretty sure we'll get to a lot of that through this conference. But I had a lot of books, a lot of things that I had to first deal with, just me, not including what I had to then deal with in terms of learning who they were as two boys, and had to learn how to raise them according to God's standard.
You start, whoever's there, name your books, and then we're going to come back here. Just name books that you read.
When it comes to parenting, I read Raising Them Up Without Tearing Them Down. I've read The Indigo Child. I've read, for myself personally, I've read Anger is a Choice. As a couple, we read the Five Love Languages book. One of the very first books that I think was very powerful that you all, that you and Duran, you and Jill Duran had us read, was just understanding temperaments. So the Temperament series book is one that really jumps out. I think one of my best books ever by far, Jill, you recommended, and I think that's the one that really totally set me free, and that was Loving What Is by Byron Katie. Probably one of the best books that I've ever read because it helped me, one, to deal with the trauma and the drama that I grew up with, and to understand that what I went through was my reality, and I had to then in turn love my reality. And in me doing that, the way that I even approach life, and I'm going to pass it on, but that book was very profound, but it allowed me to realize that although I wasn't responsible for the way things turned out in my life, that it wasn't my fault, but it was my responsibility to come out of it. And I could no longer continue to say, oh, my father wasn't there, oh, my father wasn't there, oh, my mother was on drugs. Okay, those things were real, and that was my reality, and it wasn't my fault. I didn't ask for that, but it is my responsibility to deal with those hurts, those traumas, those dramas, and then now break that curse in my life and in my bloodline so that my kids and those that come after me. And so that was one of probably, again, by far the best book that I read, which was Loving What Is by Byron Katie.
Just a couple for me that just jump out. One, Making Sense of the Men of Your Life really blessed me as a parent. One, because I'm a mother, and I live in a house with a husband and 2 sons, and I had to really identify with who was I dealing with in raising boys. There are so many things that just being female that I didn't recognize that men did. So I had to first understand who men were, and then that would help me to help raise my sons. I also had a book called Mother and Sons, which I don't think is in print anymore, but that book blessed me as far as interacting with young kids and young boys, and how you're really their first love. You're really that first woman that they fall in love with. So it was weird because when I would read it, it talked about things like how your son would rub your legs and, as a sign of affection. And whereas a lot of times we think that's weird as mothers, but it's like they're men, we're women, and how that's not awkward. But that's a way that they show that they affection towards their moms. And so I had to understand that. So Mothers and Sons, I can't remember the author. Another one we read was Preparing for Adolescence. And that helped us through that stage of their lives, just understanding what they were going to go through as kids transitioning into teenagers, transitioning into young adults. And even in reading that book, we did a book club with the parents of their friends, because we wanted to know, well, not only are who we're dealing with as far as our kids, but our kids' friends and then their parents. What are their parents instilling in them? So we could help determine whose house am I going to let my child stay at. I need to know the mindset of that friend's parents, not just the friend. So we would do book clubs, and we would read certain books. Another one we read, it was Preparing for Adolescence and Running the Rapids. I think that was Kevin Lehman. So we did a book club with that one too, because we wanted to hear the mentality of the people that our kids were spending time with when they weren't in our presence. Gosh, there's so many. But those are some of the few that stick out to me right now that really blessed me. If anybody else want to jump in.
For me, my name is Janice Sexton. I am a mother of 2 young, high-energy girls, and that can be overwhelming at times, especially our youngest daughter. She was born with liver disease, so there was a lot of trauma in the beginning of her life, and just going back and forth and trying to manage everything with being a mom, being a wife, being a teacher. And so I ended up reading this book called Unglued where it basically talked about, you feel as though your life is just out of control, but you can find that balance in all of those areas, and that balance starts with a foundation in God and who you are. And it really focused on who you are as a mom. And then also as a mom for my girls, learning how to pray for them was important. So I read a book called Praying Circles Around Your Children, when it basically talks about having a scripture, a promise from the Lord, and you just kind of pray it over your kids until you see it come to fruition. So when I think about my youngest daughter, her name is Samora, when she was going through that first year of her life, we were back and forth to the hospital. And it was a scripture from Acts, and it talks about the healing power of the Lord and his miracles, and that was something that I prayed over her for a year. And so by the end of that year, she ended up with her transplant, and she's been healthy. We had one little blip this week with her going into rejection, but other than that, she's been completely healthy, and I owe that all to that book and knowing what to pray over my girls.
I'm Sheldon Sexton. Running the Rapids was one book, 5 Love Languages, and also 5 Love Languages for teenagers. It's a little bit different how it translates from adults to teenagers. There was another book that you read that talked about temperaments, which was it was a Kevin Leman book. We'll get the name of it for a second, but I think for me that was big to understand my daughter, the oldest, and her temperament. She always asks a lot of questions, and so for me that just used to bug me, like, okay, just do what you need to do, but her temperament, she needs to know what's coming next. So just understanding her was really good in that book.
Okay, just real quick. What a Difference a Daddy Makes helped me with dealing with daughters, 2 daughters. Another one, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. And then the last one, Quick to Listen, Slow to Speak.
My name is Tony West, and I enjoy reading The Power of a Praying Wife. I enjoyed reading Raising a Gifted Child, and I also enjoyed reading From Hood to Harvard. Those books helped me to be able to instill, values and into my family. One of my values is family. So with reading those books, I learned how to pray and how to go through hard times and put all of my trust and faith in God, for my family.
My name's Elliot Montgomery. Riv gave me the book, Anger is a Choice. Why he gave me that book, I do not know. Another book I liked was Quick to Listen, Slow to Speak. And I just saw Ryan reading one of my favorite books from the church, the Mindset book. It told me that I had to either change my mind or stay messed up and do what I wanted to do. Y'all said make it cool.
Books. Ed, let's get through it quickly because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Just
All right.
top 3.
1, 2. Oh, top 3.
Because I want you guys, listen, these people got 50, 60, 70 books on their bookshelf. But go ahead.
Lost Art of Listening.
What?
Lost Art of Listening.
Okay.
I don't know who the person was that wrote it. Anger is a Choice. And Every Young Man's Battle, Every Young Woman's Battle, that whole series.
Okay.
One book that was helpful to me is called Nurture Shock, and it really was about being in a culture where we overly nurture our kids to the point where they think that that they are supposed to be successful at every single thing. And so it was just very helpful in working with my kids to get the balance, like you are not going to be good at everything. But there are some things you're going to be good at, and there's some things that are other people's strengths. Another book that I read with my daughter is Raising Them Chaste, and that was just very helpful in just setting the standard in terms of what the expectations were for her as it related to purity. And another book that you can go on Abe Books, but it's a textbook because I teach stages of development through the lifespan. And you can go on and you can get it from Amazon, Abe Books or something, maybe for an older edition for maybe $2 or $3. but it literally goes through conception to death. And it really has been helpful just over the years. And I remember being in school and reading the first edition of this book, but it just has always been helpful for me in terms of knowing what is developmentally appropriate for my children. And so not putting expectations on them that shouldn't be on them based on where they were in terms of their age, in terms of their emotional state. So those are the books.
And Hood to Harvard, that was a great one for me too.
Oh, by the way, just tell them, the author of Hood to Harvard is this beautiful sister called Jill Ann Cloud. We'll talk about it as we keep going. Anybody else? Come on.
Sure. So raising a strong-willed child, yes, somebody feel it. Countering the conspiracy to destroy black boys.
Stop there. Raising a strong-willed child is what I had to do with Talita. And I just want to say it because I'll forget it. Is that the book where they said, say yes more often than you say
Yes.
no? Okay.
Yeah.
That principle changed my life because she was 13 trying to lose her hymen. And I was saying, no, that's not going to happen. He started saying, say yes more often than you say no. So that when you say no, they know that you mean it. So you got to find a whole lot of things to say yes to. Woo, Lord have mercy. Let's keep going.
And so you said the whole every young man's battle, every young woman's battle, and raising them chaste, that was a real good one for us too.
Raising Them Chaste. It's a white book with a purple burgundy top on it.
So I too. Oh, go ahead.
Chaste. Go ahead, Cad Lasky.
I too had a long list of books, but one of my top books that I read later on in their years when they were kind of teenagers, and I think they was in his early 20s, was Hood to Harvard. That one I kind of read for myself because I was getting help as a parent after all of the struggle that I had during the years with them. The other book that was very good was A Strong-Willed Child because, as y'all know, my youngest son, Devereaux, is a very strong-willed child. And at that point, I was actually breaking the gift that God had in him, trying to silence him with my aggression because I didn't know anything else to do. I was just trying to meet my perceived aggression that he had with aggression of my own, which was very black and angry, which we probably will talk about today. And the other book that I had was Boundaries with Kids. And
what?
Boundaries with Kids.
Okay.
That was a good one because this was during the time where I was fluctuating between being a very aggressive parent to being a very passive one, back and forth, trying to be their friend, but at the same time trying to run the household. And so they were actually running the household, and I had to take my household back. And that came with two brothers came to me. Actually, Deron was one, and then Roy was one, saying, these kids, they are the ones raising themselves. You're not here. And they had no boundaries or no standards to follow through with because I had none, which we'll talk about today. So those three books were very good for me.
Okay. We got to wrap it up, so make it quicker, please.
Okay, mine are really quick. A big thing is just being intentional. And so because I knew that I had deficits as relates to how I perceived life and growing up, that I had to allow God to grow me up. So that's a lot of the books that I read were associated with that. So one of them was Search for Significance. So when I really went through that Search for Significance book, it helped me as I was relating to my children and how they were searching for significance. But I had to make sure that I allowed God to raise me and stop being a parent out of my past versus being a parent intentionally right now. Another one was Raising a Modern Day Knight, because I did not have a father figure that I would see at that time as somebody who I would want to model my son after. I needed to understand what that looked like. I needed to understand what it looked like to have a male and a man who's running after God's own heart. So I had to read something to give me some identity so I can pour something into him that I had not seen in and of myself.
I'm gonna make it quick.
Every book in the world. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Every book in the world. Angry Black Man, Joseph Stoddard. Now, number one book is Toxic Parent. And if you ever been abused, this is the book to get. Amen. Toxic
Parents. That was the next book I was going to say. Toxic parents will set you free and you'll leave your kids alone, and you'll leave your parents alone, because you'll want them to leave you alone. Toxic parents.
For me, my top three, Women Who Try Too Hard by Kevin Leman. The birth order book, having triplets, it was really no birth order sort of kind of, but everybody was kind of, they came out 3 different times, but because they were triplets, they all acted different. So I was just trying to find my way for birth order. And then as a family, we read Hood to Harvard, which was it was such a great time for us because not only was it their godmom that wrote it, but they could also see themselves in the book. So if you don't have it, you need to get it.
When Jill wrote The Hood to Harvard, she wrote for those who are listening to us, and we don't say this, heck yeah, I say it as bragging. Let me stop that mess. We raised an awesome doctor, an awesome woman, a contributor to society. I was her stepfather. I chose not to believe in that and said, this is my daughter, my wife, and we'll talk about it. But we raised a beautiful daughter. And what is our philosophy? And I wanted to give everybody to talk about their books. If you don't put anything new in, nothing new is going to come out. And this conference is about breaking strongholds. Don't go home and try to read every single book. Say, God, these are the first 2 books I need to read. And just deal with that because it's going to take a while. But every one of these people, their bookshelves are full because they said, if you want to hide something from a black man, put it in a book. And so what we have done is put it in a book, and then what my wife has done is put a play-by-play of how we almost ruined her and how we helped her get where she is. And I could brag about everybody else in here, but I want you to know this is where we are. I now want to make a transition. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't see. Hold on, Greg, please.
Real quick, one of mine was If You Had Controlling Parents. And that book really put into perspective.
Is that the name of the book?
Huh?
That's the name of the book?
Yes, that's the name of the book, If You Had Controlling Parents. And that gave me the platform to look at my past and not knowing how much that was going to help me to go forward. Another book was Making Children Mine Without Losing Yours. And
Making what?
Making Children Mind Without Losing Yours.
Okay.
Another book is Emotional Blackmail. And last one is The Mind of Boys.
And for me, Point Man, which as a Christian man specifically, but just as a man teaching you how to lead your family and boundaries in marriage.
One of the mistakes that I did with reading books was that I treated so much as knowledge, and I went home and tried to practice like steps on my kids. I soon learned as I made mistakes in reading the books that God had to give me the power to help me to process the information that I was getting so I could appropriate it correctly with my children. Because they're not objects and you just can't fix them with a 1, 2, 3 situational solution. That was my temptation because I was tired at that point. But God had to slow me down to say, hey, wait a minute, these are human beings that you're dealing with. So you have to read this, pray over it, and let me help you walk you through this to help your children and yourselves and not try to just go and make a quick fix with it.
Okay. We do the books because the books help us put together an internal vision. I'd like to transition to you, Jill. I believe I'm supposed to come to you. Yeah, because we want to talk about mission and vision for your families for the future. Why is that important? What do you have to say about that?
Well, first and foremost, no matter what you've heard up here today, none of it falls in the right space unless you connect it to why. It has to be connected to why. Otherwise, as Cabby just said, you will read books. If I write a book, it's technically my story. I can help you with my story, but you have your own story and you have your own mountains to climb. So what I do is I give you encouragement and I show you that it can happen, but the footwork is still yours. So the why is very, very important. Why are you reading this book? Because if you go in thinking that you could just read those books and then go laid on top of some bad biological roots. Old family, laid on top of anger, laid on top of things that have not been processed. So when it comes to vision, or even while we're here, it is so important for us to let kids know what life is about. Not just what life is about, but how things work. See, that's the why is really how things work. And I think that talking about community, what God says about community, the importance of community, why they matter, why they can't live without other people. One of the stories I can tell you is my daughter, and it's in my book. My daughter, at some point, as a teenager, began to get to the point where someone would make her angry, and a good friend would make her angry, or, you know, all teenage girls, they get to gossiping a bit. And she got a little bothered by it, and she decided that she wasn't going to talk to her friend anymore, and she didn't care. And I don't need her. I said, yes, you do. I want you to know you need people. I want you to know you need people. And you have to know how to hear as a parent. You have to know what they're saying from the spiritual standpoint. Yes, she was bothered, her feelings was hurt, and she was saying she didn't need people. I had to make sure that she didn't live off that, because some people right now cannot have a decent relationship because they blow out so easily. Because they still have that thing in the back of their mind that I don't need people, that some parent did not stop that conversation. So I said, how do I stop that conversation? And I told her, even back then, you have lots of friends. And they love you one way, you love them another way. And your problem is that she didn't love you exactly the way you loved her. But let me show you what love is. I have another friend who Maria. Maria is my sister. She's whiter than white, but you couldn't tell if you hear her talking to how she's just all one of us. But I've known her for many, many years. And years ago, when we were just first starting ministry, she used to come and help me. She used to come and help. Sometimes she'd help wash clothes. Sometimes she'd help me clean, because I was really, really, really busy. But when she needed me, I had a savings account. And she would say to me, Jill, I wish I could do for you what you do for me. I said, you do for me what I do for you. I give you what I have in abundance, and you give me what you have in abundance. What I'm asking you to do is to come inside my house. You know how much trust I have for you? You know how much value you have to be to me? To let you come in my house, and not just if you want to help me because I'm busy washing my clothes, but wash my husband's clothes. I don't know what you're going to see in that basket.
Right there.
But do you know, see, I want you all to know that community, when it comes to the mission and us talking about bringing back old-fashioned values using new tools. See, love has never gotten old. What has gotten old is how we deal with our hurts. How we're not addressing our hurts, and how we're doing it on surface by pasting things on. Let me go get a book. Your head won't do it. It has to hit your heart. I saw a quote, and I used it on the blog, on our Family Matters blog, and I think it was written by some Buddhist person. But the bottom line is, it says, listen, you can live without religion, and you can live without meditation, but you cannot live without human affection. And God made us that way. God made us that way. And if you can instill, here's the vision, it's community. But not how community was done in front of me. I called it body language. What kind of language did I get from my family? What I didn't get from my family. That when something happens, punishment isn't the first thing you do. I didn't get from my family that love is the first thing you show. Because if you don't show love first, a whole lot of shame gonna come up that you don't know that shame comes automatically after someone makes a mistake. And it has nothing to do with you. It's just the way we're built with these different voices. And so what is the mission and vision of family? First and foremost, your children have to know how things work. So one of the things we do, I won't talk about all the books that we read, but one of the things we did do is we paid our daughter to read when she was younger. Because me getting the information and her not getting the information and not being able to talk to me about whether she even understands the information or not. There's another wonderful saying that I like. A great teacher, the best teacher will tell you where to look, but they won't tell you what to see. So if I read a book and then I brought back what I got out of the book, I've just told her what to see. But if she read the book with me, then she can talk to me about what in that book stood out for her. Why? Because the way things work is that we all have our special gift. That means we all hear things differently. That means some things that are important to you are not important to me. Some things you gravitate towards and that you might want to talk about, they may not even care about. But it doesn't mean that they don't have something that they care about that matters to them and how they're going to be in the future. So the vision and the mission of any parenting conference is this. You got to get to the point where you know how things work.
Right.
So that you can be that. This is not talking anymore. You do this by your being. I do this and not open my mouth. I can send a message and never open my mouth. But the other part is, what is my story? I was bitter. Listen, it was the way we dealt with things. If you did something I didn't like, I'm out. I had to learn, and that wasn't the case. But the one thing I learned, and I wrote this in the book, but I talked to Deron about this, in the church about this, and that is I would watch how my daughter would handle situations. And when she started saying, I don't need this friend, I put her aside. And then she started being bothered with Deron, her stepdad, who was the only dad that was consistent in her life. And I saw how she was handling it. I looked at her, I said, let me tell you first that I'm sorry. I did this to you. When you saw me on the phone, I wasn't talking to you, but when you heard how I was dealing with other people, I taught you how to do this. I taught you that bitterness worked. I taught you that bitterness had a value to it. So give me the opportunity to undo this. Listen, if I can teach you this, I can teach you something else, and I can replace this. But I first had to admit that I was contaminating the space. God gave me a blank page with this girl. He knew what was written on her script, but he gave me a blank page to add to his creation. And I was writing on that page my life.
Right.
I had to get out of my life, be healed, and then let God show me this is what community is, whether you like it or not. And we, as an African-American community, we need this. And we need it bad.
I just want to add to what you're saying, and then we'll end up transitioning. I don't know if anybody else here is going to have anything, but when you said we paid her, she was still in college, wasn't she? Was she 17?
Well, we paid her to read.
I got you, but I just want to, we paid her. Here's how I would do it. When she was younger, I'd take $100.
That one you did in college.
That was in college. So then I took $100 bills. I may have cut 4 of them in half and said, every 2 chapters that you read of this, I'm going to give you the other side of this bill. I paid her to learn that. It wasn't in college. She was in college. She was in the later years in college. Because when we went on vacation, this was now a 1.5 years, 2 years later, she and Jill was just having a discussion, and Jill was trying to get on her. And I said, this girl is being too smart. Let me jump in there, Mr. Billy Badbutt, and get into this conversation. We now call that conversation Christmas, because she read me from head to toe. And as she was reading me, I just started crying. Because I had told her in the beginning, I didn't watch these women grow up in my church. I need you to deal with these strongholds in your life. Deal with it. Well, when she started wearing me out, I cried because I said, this is what I was looking for. She's being healed. And I cried. I said, I'm so grateful. Now, it was killing me. But I said, I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with me, because that lets me know you are on your way to break that. So you have to find different incentives to get them to be motivated to change their brain. If you have something, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just say this. Everything for me comes from my intent. Why am I doing this? Because that's where the power is. So what do we understand? We would take my generation of people. We would give kids allowances for cleaning their room. We would give kids allowances, money to do certain things. Well, I decided, and I don't know, I probably read this somewhere, I'm sure, I don't remember where, but I decided that I'm not going to pay you to clean a room that's your room. Why should I pay you to clean your room? Who pays me How much do you pay me to go to work every day? Nothing. I'm talking about her. So, but I'm not going to pay you to clean your room. I'm going to pay you to do something that you don't want to do. I'm not going to pay you to do something that you're supposed to do. It's your room. If it's a mess, you did it. Clean your room. Nobody pays me to do the dishes to clean the house. That's what we have to do as a family. So my why was she needed money. You need to be able to give them something. So I made money the kind of valuable that I wanted it to be. No, I'm not going to pay you to do what you're supposed to do. I'm going to pay you to do what you don't want to do. And because she wanted the money, what she didn't want to do is what she does like to do now. Because we had to instill in her a habit that wasn't in my family. Reading wasn't a habit in my family. So this opened her up to it. And as Ron said to most of you all, she went to college, she went to medical school, and she ended up going to Harvard. And this is why, and I'll say this last thing, when I wrote Hood to Harvard, a part of that is called Parental People Too, because I wrote this book after I went through it all. That means I had the beginning, the middle, the end, the hard times, the things I did right, the things I did wrong, because by now she's in Harvard. And I get to tell that story. Why is that? Because I believe all of us are in a place where we would love to know how to stand dealing with somebody that's very different from us, but we don't want to control them, but we don't want them to control us either.
I think Riv and Jill and yourself, D, did a good job explaining the vision and importance of it. But for me, the vision and knowing your why, it not only tells you, helps you to focus where you're going, but when you mess up, it helps you to get up and get back on course. Just real quickly, I know when I made a lot of mistakes. And when I came up, I know my dad loved me. My mom loved me. But when I was punished, I was beaten. And oftentimes, it get tough for me to talk about sometimes, but oftentimes, I would have bruises on me. And I would go to school, and kids would see those bruises. And I would go to the pool, the neighborhood pool with my buddies, and people would see those bruises, and I'd get teased about that. And, when I got married and had my own kids, see, I didn't know anything was wrong with it back then. I'm just thinking they joning, But when I had my own kids, I love my kids, and love my wife, but that was in me to do. That was just in me. And so, I remember one time Eden, she may have been, 4 years old maybe? I don't know if you remember, she was talking or whatever. She running around the house or whatever, saying, doing stuff that 4-year-olds do. But me being a grown man saying, I got to teach her. So I tell her to come here, but I'm yelling at a 4-year-old. She goes up to run up the steps. I grab her. She turns around, and I'm a heavy-handed dude, but I pop her, not thinking I'd hit her hard. But her nose started bleeding. And it was at that time, I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, her nose started bleeding. You were standing right there.
Hey, Ed, leave it alone. Keep telling your story.
But I just realized at that time I had an anger problem. And, I said, all right, I got to go through, and I had learned through, how to study the Bible class way back in Capitol Plaza, the concordance. So I went through and looked up all the scriptures on anger. And I just started reading those and writing them down and memorizing them and whatnot. And then that's what really started my journey to getting healed, and then learning to put that into practice. And so I'm saying that because I had a vision for my kids. I said, I knew I wanted my kids to know God for themselves. I knew it was going to be a point in time where they were going to be out from my presence. And I couldn't keep them under me all the time, not just when they were young, but also when they got older. And so I say, y'all got to know the voice of God for yourself. You got to know how to discern the voice of God. You got to discern between good and evil for yourself. So when you're not here, you know when something is off. You know, even your mom or I can come to you and say something and it can be off. But you only know that if you know how to discern truth. And so that was the main thing that I wanted for my children. You know, the main thing. And so I'm saying that because I realized that I had gotten off. When I had gotten off, that's what drove me back. Because I would feel a lot of shame. I would feel a lot of guilt. Because it would happen, then I would repent, and then
What would happen?
I would have an explosive outburst.
Okay.
You know, and like you were saying earlier, one of the outbursts were I was taking Eden, and at this point she was in high school. I was taking her to her graduation thing over at in Greenbelt at that ball place. What's that ball? That ball place over there. Mountains Crosswinds. So I was taking her over there, so this is like a pretty formal type event, and so we were running behind. I know I'm going to wrap it up. So I cut this lady off, you know, because I was trying to get to where I was trying to go. And so the lady pulled up beside me, and she got to going, you know, going at me and whatnot. And so me, again, how I was raised. It's just,
shame the devil. Tell the truth.
No,
I got your message.
So what I'm saying is when I felt attacked, and I'm thinking this lady, y'all gotta understand how I was raised, man. I'm thinking this lady girl attacked my family, you know, going over the top. Well, my father went over the top, so I was going over the top. So I started going at her, and I'm saying, I'm dropping F-bombs, calling her names, every name that you don't want to call a woman, that's what I'm calling her. My daughter's in the back seat, my wife is here, so she makes a right turn. Now I'm behind her. She makes a right turn. I'm still going at her. I can't calm down. I can't let her go. Ty saying, Ed. And so I've just gone all the way there. Eden is in the back seat. She's observing all of this. And so she makes a right turn. I make a right turn. I'm still going. She make a left turn. I make a left turn. Then before you know it, she pulling up into the parking lot that I'm pulling up into. And so come find out, this lady going to the same event that I'm going to. And so by this time, I realized, Ed, you done did it again. And so I go in, and it took me, so much shame had come on me, that it took me at least a good 4 or 5 months or whatever to get past. I'm saying, how is it that I keep going here and allowing this to happen? But even in the midst of that, I felt the shame inwardly, but I was still able to move forward because I knew my why and my vision. Does that make sense?
Let me jump in, Ed.
And,
I'm sorry. Go, Taya.
And I don't want y'all to think that.
Too late.
Yeah.
Don't sanitize it.
Don't you do it. Taya, all them counsel says, don't you do it.
Let me just say this. It is my responsibility to protect my children, even if the person that is displaying the negative behavior is my husband.
There you
And
go.
so I don't want you all, if you're in those positions, I had to let my children know that this is not okay. And so even whether it was a conversation over to the side, whether it was a conversation right there with Ed, I had to let them know that this was not acceptable behavior, that I didn't think it was okay. And so you have to be willing to stand up, even though sometimes it would get very funky between us because he thought that I was usurping his authority. But it became so important for my kids because I came up at a place where I always didn't feel defended. So if you ever ask anybody in my family, if you come for my children, you better watch yourself. Because I had to defend myself against, I have been in more than enough fights with my aunts and uncles. They will tell you, okay? They will tell you. I had to defend myself so much. as a person, and that's not my temperament. But in order for me to survive, I had to come at you like we were on the street. And so I had to, and I didn't want my kids to feel like in their own home that there was no one to defend them. And so it just became very important, even though Ed had to go through whatever he had to go through, I had to make sure that my kids knew that it was not right, and that we were going to have a conversation about it, and that they could feel comfortable saying to me, Mommy, I didn't like that. And they say it to me on other stuff too. But just to let you know that if God has given you some kids, it's your responsibility to defend them. So.
Let me just jump in real quick. I'm going to go back to you, Ed. That is so good what you're saying, Ty, because just 3 weeks ago I was in the kitchen and my wife was saying something about what had happened with our daughter and Talita and my uncle or something, and they were protecting them over some kind of shoe or whatever the case may be. And he went off. He had diabetes, and he went off on them things. Somebody stole his flip-flops.
Lita was on a vacation with his parents, so she was away from me and away from him, and now that's the setting of this story. Go ahead.
Right. And so somehow she came home and told you what?
She came home, or she may even called me from there, and she told me how his uncle was fussing at her and another little girl who was there because he lost his flip-flop. What is those flip-flops at Safeway? 79 cents, $1.29? He lost his flip-flops and decided that they purposely threw his flip-flops in the water and they was hiding from him. And he was being really aggressive with them, and wasn't her uncle, okay? So definitely she didn't know him that well. And he was doing that, and so by the time she told me, I called Deron's mom up. And I said, listen, you don't get to do that. If he's doing that to her, you call me. You call me and I'll come get her. But that thing that's all right in your family is not all right in my family.
And she jumped in.
I expected you to not let that happen. Now I understood I was talking to a person who lived with raging men and chaos and men with certain kind of behavior, so they could pass some things off. And guess what? You get to love who you want to love. But what you don't get to do is take that person right there and mix her up in what you say you love. And she's 36, and I probably was still having this conversation last week or 2 weeks ago when I decided I wasn't going to call somebody up and let them know this because she's 36 and I need to get out of it now. But absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so the story was, yes, that did happen. And I had to say, when she's in your care, if it gets too hot, this is not how I do mother. This is not how I do friendship. This is not how I do. So can you hear my values? And if they ain't working for you, let me know. And I'll make the sacrifice and come get her. But absolutely not will anybody be any big grown man hollering at my 9-year-old.
And my wife did the same thing to me, Taya. I'm sure some of the wives here did the same thing. But the reason I jumped in to say something, because then I recognized when we started talking about that story, thinking about this conference, I said, I don't think my mother ever did that to me. And then I thought about it, and I started crying. I said, no, I remember she would always tell me after I got beat, your father's a good man. You made him act like this. If you do the right thing, you won't make him crazy. And so I learned to love chaos. When I got here, this woman said, you are not going to ruin the psyche of my daughter.
The story is we got married. My idea is that I wasn't going to marry until Talita turned 18 because I didn't want anybody else's influence in her life. Because I didn't want to I grew up in Southeast D.C., not on the side, not the way it looked now, the way it was. Okay, when you had to run home from school to fight. And I remember Deron doing one of his incredible Hulk moments. And as long as you're doing that on your own and you don't affect her, do your thing. But this particular day, I must have had enough. And he was, I said, okay, you think you're the only one crazy? I went and kicked the door down. Boom! I kicked holes in the door.
Scared the
kicked
hell
it
out
down.
of me.
I told him, I said, listen, I got feelings too. I just got to control them. So guess what? Let's do this. Let me get out of control. Because I'm telling you, I'm not telling you a story.
You want to know who crazy? You want to know who crazy? Poosh.
You think you the only
Poosh. I said, you're going to hurt yourself. Stop.
It was so Yeah, and afterwards you was on the knee.
I was on the
knees,
begging
talking
her,
about,
please,
Let's
please,
hold hands and pray.
let's hold hands and pray. Because I had never seen that side of her.
Because we all have a side that we subdue. Amen.
I come from a household where my father was very dominant and my mother was very docile, or it still is. I won't use it in the past tense. And so, you need me? Oh. And so for me, one, being in a house full of testosterone and having to recognize that my husband had to be a father, and that sometimes that looked very different from how I would have handled a situation. I also had to step in and be able to discern when it was too much. And so, I thank God for Jill because, through conferences and women's conferences or even personal conversations, it helped me to be able to see, in addition to having a relationship with God and hearing the Holy Spirit, when it was a good time for me to step in and when it wasn't. And allow him to be a father, but also be that person. Because even with Duran's stories, hearing him say the relationship between him and his dad and how sometimes he would want his mom to say something, I had to internalize that to say there are going to be times where I had to step in and say, no, okay, this is too much. Or when situations would happen and, Rivian would because again, even as a father, there are times where you have to humble yourself and go to your children and say, I should not have acted in that way. And there were times where our kids would say, well, no, Dad, I deserved it. And we both had to reiterate no. So sometimes there are things that are deserving of, what may have happened or the discipline. But then there's sometimes, because we're human. Yeah, we're people too, but we're human and we're going to make mistakes. And as parents, I think it's so key that we are able to identify when we are wrong and have that relationship with our kids to be able to go back and say, no, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have acted that way. And so I think it's huge as mothers, especially when you're dealing with a father-son relationship. And I'm not saying it's any less father-daughter or, mother-daughter, because that's not my experience. But I will attest to what Taya was saying, is that there are times where you have to step in as a mother and say, no, enough is enough. Or go back to your child and say, look, your father should not have acted that way. Or it's times where I have to go to him and say, hey, you need to go apologize. You should not have said that, and vice versa. But we have that openness within our family, and to know that that's okay. And so, again, Taya, thank you for sharing your story. I thank God for this conference, because we need, especially in our community, we need that. We need to know that just because I'm the father and I'm the head of the household and this is how I'm going to do things doesn't necessarily always mean that that's the right way to do it. So I just wanted to, again, just add that piece to say, no, we as moms, it's a lot of times, or I won't say a lot, but there are going to be times where it's our responsibility to step in, because we are the protector. We're the nurturer. And sometimes then things can get a little out of hand. So,
Father, we thank you for what we've learned so far. May God bless you. This is some serious wisdom that he's dropping in your family. In Jesus' name, amen.